Good morning.
Morning, Father.
I had an opportunity to visit my family last month, and I took a very short side trip of 5 days to the state of Washington to visit Mount Baker and Mount Rainier. And I took a flight up to Seattle, Tacoma, and got off the aircraft, and I was going to rent a pickup. And the funny thing was we headed for the destination where all the car rentals are, and everybody had the same idea. We were all renting from the same discount rental agency, so that it was this enormous line, and I waited like 30 minutes to be served, and then maybe 10 seconds before I headed up to the booth, I took out my driver's license and my credit card, and I looked at them and I said, "Oh my goodness." And I handed them the driver's license and the credit card. The woman took my information, and when she looked at my driver's license, she said, "Sir, your driver's license is expired." And I looked behind me, and there were 10 people that were staring at me, and they're like, "Oh, there's going to be some drama this afternoon." And I thought for 2 seconds, I had these very negative but uncharitable thoughts about the Department of Motor Vehicles. And I was asking myself there and then, like, why didn't I get a notification? Because usually they do send one out. And then I realized because of the COVID situation, there's no notification if your driver's license expires. And I politely said, "So, what are we going to do about this?" And then there was a woman who was helping someone else, and she looked over at me and she said, "You want to know something? I have a friend, and he owns a rental agency, and he will rent to anybody, even if their license is expired. But sir, it will cost you." And I said, "Okay, we can keep that in mind. Are there any other solutions?" And the woman that was helping me out said, "This happens all the time." She said, "Do you have a smartphone?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Re-register your driver's license online." And I said, "Okay." And I said, "It's going to take me 15 or 20 minutes. Can I come back to the front of the line because there's still 10 people behind me?" And she said, "Yes, of course." So it took me 2 hours to get out of the airport, and finally I was able to rent that pickup. And sometimes we just we have to try to be constructive and think about what are positive ways to resolve a situation when something unexpected happens or something unpredictable happens. And if you've been watching the evening news for the past 6 weeks, a lot of unpredictable and unusual things have taken place in places like Portland, Seattle, New York, Atlanta, and other places. We see these images of riots. And I've been asking myself this week, does Jesus have anything to say about violence? Or whether it's appropriate or not, or whether it's ever justifiable? And the answer is definitively yes. And we rarely attribute this story to a discussion on violence or rioting, but actually the whole homily is about riot. And I am referring to John chapter 10 and the story of the Good Shepherd. Last week I preached about John chapter 21 and the fact that we have to say, "I love you" to Jesus. Very important thing today. Say during times of crisis. We have to say, "I love you." And this week I thought I'd share with you another section of John, because John is my favorite gospel. It's the Good Shepherd, and let's see if I have my Bible right here. I do. Let me read to you the first line from John chapter 10. It's the Good Shepherd account. It says, so Jesus is in Jerusalem, probably in the temple of Jerusalem. And Jesus says, "I say to you, whoever does not enter the sheepfold through the gate, but climbs over elsewhere, is a thief and a robber. But whoever enters through the gate is a shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens it for him. The sheep hear his voice as he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out." Now it's interesting, the first line, he says, "Whoever does not enter through the gate is a thief and a robber." And before I became a priest, I would go to church on Sunday, sit in the pews, and I would hear the story and say, what in the world is Jesus talking about? Why does he set up a straw man, a thief and a robber? What is he talking about? And especially if he's talking about going into the sheepfold, which would really be the kingdom of heaven, you can't force your way in, right? We can't demand that we get into the kingdom of heaven. We can't storm the pearly gates. So who is he talking about? And what is he talking about? And I'm not the only one who's had that thought. John says at the end of the paragraph, although Jesus used this figure of speech, they did not realize what he was trying to say. Well, I was not the only one who was confused when he shared this story. So Jesus said again, "Amen, I say to you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers." There we go again, thieves and robbers. And I'm fortunate because I was able to study theology in Rome. And actually, for John's Gospel, I had a world-famous scholar. His name was Professor Diaz from Spain. And Professor Diaz had a theory, and he said that Jesus was preaching in the temple. And he was standing at the portico, and there were people outside the gate of the temple. And he said, "You want to know if you want to come into the courtyard, you have to come through me. And he's standing at the gate. And the funny thing was that the word for courtyard and the word for sheep in Greek is the same. Aule, A-U-L-E. And it can mean a lot of things. It can mean like a pen for apples, or it can mean a courtyard to the temple. So Jesus is saying, if you want to get into the courtyard, you've got to come through me. And really, euphemistically, what he's saying is, if you want to get into the kingdom of heaven, you've got to come through me. But then he has this bizarre reference to thieves and robbers that he mentions twice. What in the world is he talking about? So I checked the original Greek, and the Greek for robber that he uses is lestes, L-E-S-T-E-S. Doesn't really, we don't have a copy in English. And I'm thinking that maybe the best translation for lestes is bandit, or highway robber, or outlaw. Lestes is outlaw. And Jesus is saying, if you try to jump over the fence or the wall, you are an outlaw. And in John's Gospel, this only happens twice. He only uses the word outlaw twice. Here, in John 10, we talk about the good shepherd, and he says, I am not an outlaw. And then in John 18, 19, or 20, where Pilate tries to get Jesus off the hook. And he says, you know, we have this tradition in Passover that we release a prisoner to you. So he finds an outlaw, Barabbas. And he says, who do you want to release, Barabbas the outlaw or Jesus? And the crowd says, the outlaw. And Professor Rios was suggesting that there was actually a riot in the temple. And that those people actually frightened the people who were in the church. And Jesus also says that the chief priests cut and run. He says, I am the good shepherd. A good shepherd lays down his life. A hired man who is not a shepherd and whose sheep are not his own sees a wolf coming, that's the robber, and leaves the sheep and runs away. According to the theory that I heard, that was Caiaphas. So Caiaphas disappeared when there was a riot. And Jesus is saying, maybe a couple of weeks after the fact, I am the good shepherd, and I am not an outlaw. He's saying Barabbas is an outlaw. Most importantly, the Lord tells us, he said, the most important thing that we have to do is listen to him. That's what he says up front. He says, the gatekeeper opens it for him, the sheep hear his voice as he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has driven them out, he walks ahead of them, the sheep follow him because they recognize his voice. The Lord tells us one of the most important things we have to do is listen to him. Last week in John 21, we were reminded that one of the most important things we have to do is say, I love you to the Lord. And here today, I'm suggesting it in John's Gospel, the story of the Good Shepherd. The other thing that we have to do is listen to God's voice. Amen.
Amen.